Why is it that when the weekend arrives, when others feel the urge to go out, meet people, be somewhere, you feel the opposite pull? You just want to go home, not because you're lazy, not because you lack social skills, and not because you dislike people, but because the louder the world becomes, the more clearly you feel your energy draining away. What you need isn't stimulation, it's quiet. Not excitement, but recovery. Why does your body relax the moment you step through the door? The door closes and something invisible switches off. You no longer need to smile at the right time, no longer need to respond just enough, no longer need to stay alert to being seen, evaluated or misunderstood. Your voice softens, your breathing slows. For the first time all day, you don't have to be a social version of yourself. You're allowed to just be. And why, even though you still want connection, do you increasingly resist going out just to show up? You begin declining gatherings that feel performative. You grow tired of conversations that require constant engagement. Noise, crowds, comparison, and the glare of social media start to feel physically exhausting. You're not running away from life. You're searching for a place where you can grow back into yourself. If any of this feels familiar, then today we're not asking whether you're too introverted or whether you're hiding from the world. We're asking a more honest question. When someone starts preferring home over the outside world, what is actually happening psychologically? Is this fragility, or is it a more mature form of self-protection? Many people who prefer staying home aren't bad at socializing. They're not awkward, withdrawn, or incapable of connection. They're simply more sensitive to input. The same environment that feels lively to others can feel overwhelming to you. The same volume, the same pace, the same information, density registers more intensely in your nervous system. You notice subtle shifts in tone. You pick up on tension before anyone names it. You feel changes in energy even when nothing is said. You're not trying to analyze people. Your system is simply receiving more signals. Psychology refers to this as heightened sensitivity. It isn't a flaw, but it does mean your brain rarely gets to rest. In social spaces, your mind runs multiple processes at once: sound, facial cues, expectations, rules, emotional undercurrents. You're not just participating, you're constantly adjusting when to speak, when to pause, when to soften yourself, when to hold back. Over time, the outside world becomes less about connection and more about regulation. You don't hate people. You just can't relax around constant stimulation, and that's where home becomes essential. At home, you don't need to translate your feelings into acceptable language. You don't need to monitor your presence. You don't need to prove that you're okay. You can sit, breathe, drift. Not because you're avoiding life, but because your system needs somewhere to power down. Many people who love staying home appear completely fine on the outside. They work, they socialize when needed, they handle responsibilities well. They're often described as reliable, stable, emotionally composed. But they know something others don't. Outside, they're functioning, not recovering. In public spaces, you enter performance mode. You manage your reactions. You filter your emotions. You compress your fatigue into something presentable. You're not being fake. You're adapting. And adaptation is useful until it becomes constant. When this mode is sustained too long, it creates a quiet depletion, not dramatic burnout, just a slow thinning of energy. You come home without having done anything difficult, yet you feel the urge to sit down, go quiet, stop responding. Psychology calls this emotional decompression. When you spend hours regulating yourself, your body accumulates tension that has nowhere to go. Home is the first place where that tension is allowed to unwind. That's why emotions may surface there. You may feel tired, reflective, or unexpectedly sensitive. This isn't weakness, it's release. At home, you're no longer a version meant for others. You're no longer required to be efficient, engaging, or composed. You're allowed to exist, and that alone is deeply restorative. You don't stay home because you do nothing there. You stay home because it's where you finally get yourself back. There's a crucial psychological concept called a low-threat environment. It's a space where your nervous system no longer needs to stay alert, where your body stops preparing for judgment, reaction, or correction. For many people, the outside world isn't dangerous, but it is unpredictable. You don't know how people will respond, whether you'll be misunderstood, whether a conversation will turn draining. That uncertainty keeps your system lightly guarded at all times. At home, that vigilance ends. You know where things are. You know how the space feels. You know nothing is demanded of you. Soft lighting, familiar objects, repeating rituals. These aren't boring habits, they're signals of safety. And in safety, your mind finally opens. Thoughts that were postponed come forward. Emotions that were muted gain shape. Ideas that couldn't surface in noise begin to form. You're not hiding from life. You're building a container strong enough to hold it. Home isn't your retreat. It's your alignment point. From there, you can return to the world without losing yourself. Many people mistake quiet for emptiness. They assume that if nothing is happening on the surface, nothing meaningful is happening inside. But for people who prefer staying home, quiet is often where connection begins. When external noise fades, attention naturally turns inward. You start noticing your breath, your body, the emotional residue you carried home without realizing it. Thoughts that were interrupted all day finally have space to finish themselves. Outside, much of your energy goes toward adjustment, reading the room, managing impressions, responding at the right moment. At home, that outward focus dissolves. You no longer need to translate yourself. You no longer need to monitor how you're being perceived. You're allowed to simply experience what's already there. Psychologically, this kind of low stimulation environment allows for self-integration. Emotions aren't pushed aside, they're processed. Thoughts aren't rushed, they're clarified. This is why many people discover that their clearest insights don't arrive in conversation, but in silence. You're not wasting time when you choose this quiet. You're restoring coherence inside yourself, and that inner coherence becomes the foundation for everything that comes next. A common assumption is that people who prefer staying home are avoiding life, but in reality, many of them are doing the opposite. They're preventing burnout before it happens. Constant social exposure, emotional exchange, and stimulation gradually drain psychological energy. You may still function, still show up, still perform well, but internally, something thins. Home offers a necessary reset. In familiar, low-pressure environments, the nervous system shifts out of coping mode and into recovery mode. Tension softens. Emotional regulation becomes possible without effort. This restoration matters. People who give themselves enough quiet time often return to the world with more patience, not less. More emotional availability, not withdrawal. They don't need to compete for attention. They don't bring unresolved tension into relationships. They engage from stability, not depletion. So when they step back into the world, their presence feels grounded. They weren't disappearing, they were recalibrating. And that recalibration allows them to participate in life without losing themselves to it. In a culture that celebrates constant activity and visibility, choosing quiet can feel like falling behind. We're taught that value comes from movement, participation, and exposure. Stillness is often misread as stagnation, but psychological maturity isn't about doing more. It's about discernment. It's knowing which environments nourish you and which ones quietly drain you. People who prefer staying home often reach this awareness early. They stop forcing themselves into spaces that require constant self-adjustment. They begin choosing environments that align with their nervous system. This alignment is known as self-congruence, when your external life reflects your internal needs. When self-congruence increases, anxiety tends to decrease even if life appears quieter from the outside. Choosing calm, routine, and familiarity is not shrinking your life. It's making it sustainable. You learn when to engage and when to step back, when to open outward and when to return inward. That's not withdrawal, that's agency. And truly mature people don't need to prove that they're living loudly to know they're alive. If you're someone who prefers staying home, you don't need to defend it. You're not rejecting life. You're not closing yourself off. You've simply learned what restores you and what doesn't. In a world that constantly pulls outward, choosing stillness is often misunderstood. But the most important work happens when no one is watching. You stay home not to disappear, but to return to yourself. And when you do step back into the world, you bring clarity, steadiness, and quiet strength. You didn't shut the world out. You brought yourself back in. This is happy psychology. May understanding help you recognize yourself more clearly, and may you continue connecting with the world in a way that is calm, honest, and true.